Norfolk Business Show with Danny Snelling. Sponsored by MT Comms.
Okay, Jeff, we've got you in the studio. Perhaps you can just kick off by telling our listeners really what you're doing at the moment, and perhaps what your business name is, what it does, where it is, and then we'll go into a bit of background on you before a bit more detail on the business and how it runs and how you got to where you are.
Sure.
Well, all right, so over to you, mate. What's the business?
So a business called the Dental Design Studio, which of course is dental practice. And by the way, thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate. It's a pleasure. Thank you for agreeing to come on.
That's all right. My name is Jeff Sherer. I'm a dentist, and I'm the owner of the Dental Design Studio, which is a group of 22 dental practices. And with them, we have a number that are in the Norfolk area. So we have one in Kings Lynn, one in North Walsham as well. And we're looking to acquire one in Cromer soon as well. So Norfolk is an area of the country that I absolutely love, and very happy to have some businesses that are operating in the county. With the practices that we have, we started it in 2005, so we're coming up to our 20 years now.
Wow.
In fact, in a couple of weeks' time, it'll be 20 years.
Wow.
So
there you go. You're on the show to celebrate.
That's it. So I was a lot younger in those days, but still doing what we do. And I think what's nice about having a business that's a dental practice is that you actually help people and you also make a living. So it's really a double pleasure in the fact that you can make a difference to society and do good, and also be an employer and trainer and help people in the community to go through apprenticeship schemes and make a difference to people's lives. So I must say I feel very blessed to do what I do and to have had the opportunity to do that, because I have friends of mine in other businesses and sort of selling cigarettes or whatever that. It doesn't really help anybody, but dentistry is certainly something that makes a positive difference. So very pleased to be part of that.
Yeah, and I guess it's perhaps a question for later, but it's always baffled me as to why the NHS will look after our bones, our organs and everything else, but they won't look after our teeth. It's a vital piece of our body.
Sure, absolutely. And there's so many links between poor oral health and poor general health as well.
I would imagine, yeah.
So certainly it is a really important part. And in business, when you meet someone, the smile that you see is your real first introduction to the person. True. So dentistry is definitely important.
Yeah. So take me back now, and how did you get into this, and what was your background?
So originally I come from Chicago. I was born in Chicago.
Really? I wouldn't have detected that accent there. How long have you been over here?
So my family immigrated to the UK when I was 11. So my mum is an English lady and my dad was American. And I was 11 when we came. And so I did my schooling here, my GCSEs, my A-levels, and went to university to study dentistry. So I studied at Leeds University, which was...
Is that where your parents were based at that time?
So in sort of London area there, sort of in Hillingdon area there. So I went to Leeds, which was really a lot of fun, but a lot of work as well. And the truth is, when I was studying, I struggled a lot. It's never been sort of formally diagnosed, but I think I'm dyslexic. So I struggled a lot at university. I found it incredibly challenging, all the academic side of it. But I worked really hard. I tried hard and stuck with it, never gave up. And thankfully, I got to my qualification there. And that for me was really a great sort of ambition filled, because I remember at school people were telling me that they didn't think I could do it. I wasn't good enough. And some people, I suppose, would have taken that negative energy and used it to sort of bring them down. But I used it in a positive manner to motivate myself.
Yeah.
That's it.
And was the goal back then to start on your own business, or was it just to get a job in dentistry?
Yeah, basically. I mean, so when you come out of dental school, you don't really know a lot about the business of dentistry.
No.
You don't really know a lot about dentistry, really.
Life in general, probably. All you know is teeth. Yeah.
That's it. So I worked as an associate, which means I worked in somebody else's dental practice for a couple of years. But I always wanted to do things my way. I suppose that's maybe the stubborn side of me, or the sort of my own nature, that I like things done in a certain way. So it was always my ambition to set up my own dental practice, because I always wanted to be my own boss. And I remember saying to my dad, my late dad, when I was probably about 15, 16 years old, that I want to be my own man and my own boss.
Yeah.
Probably because he was stopping me from.
Was your parent? Were either of your parents in business at all?
So my dad was in IT, and that was like a really interesting time for IT, because it was before the sort of great explosion of IT as we see it now. So in those days, it was quite hard to sort of get into that industry, and he did so because he worked in IT in the military. He was in the US military. And my mum was a history teacher. So neither of them were involved in dentistry or medical. In fact,
what I'm really trying to do is discover patterns amongst people who are sat in that chair, really. So far, I've noticed that there was a sort of early work ethic. So most people tend to have done an odd job or a Saturday job or something quite early on, or a paper round or something like that. And also I've had equally as many people, parents were in business, or either they passed the business to them, or they had a business as well. But I'm just trying to look for patterns. So
Sure. Yeah. I think my parents were incredibly hardworking in their jobs that they did. Effectively, we didn't come from like a particularly wealthy family. I mean, we weren't a poor family, but we certainly weren't from a really wealthy family. But my parents were very late into their life, because they just had a lot of energy, and that was just their nature, that they wanted to be productive and doing things there. And I suppose from my mum's perspective, being a teacher, she was in a sort of like a helping profession, and maybe that's the link and the sort of what the pattern that made me get into dentistry, because in a way it is helping people and academic as well.
Yeah. So when did your own practice start, and
yeah, that's it.
How was it? What was it like? Was it just yourself? Was it?
It was myself and my dental business partner Larry. He's a dentist as well, two of us. We found a premises which was, believe it or not, my old GP practice.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Which had been abandoned for quite a number of years and just sort of sitting there unused. And my business partner Larry said to me, what do you think about setting up a dental practice here? And it was quite sort of brave thing to do at the time, because in the area where our first practice was, there was already some dental practices there. So there was already people who were offering a service. And I remember our accountant at the time said to us, you guys are going to be like bust in 6 months, because people in this area already have dentists, so they don't, and accountants and other things, and they're not going to need you. But
I'm sorry, what year was this roughly?
It was in 2005.
Okay, yeah.
So we spent probably about 4 or 5 months making the premises into the premises that it was, converting it to dental practice, which is never easy, because there's a lot of regulations and things that have to be taken into consideration for health and safety reasons, and the layout of the dental surgeries, and piping for all the compressor air and things that we need. So it took quite a lot of time to get that up into place. But what we did, which was quite unique at the time, is we two things really. We made it very spa-like, so it didn't look like a dentist.
Okay, yeah.
And nowadays there's a lot of practices that look like that. They're very sort of lots of flowers and smell very nice, and they look very pretty. But at that time, it wasn't really so normal for that to be the case. So we created a sort of spa-like environment. So when people came to the dentist, they felt like they were having an experience as well. And the other thing we
I have
did,
to say, none of my dentists have ever been nice looking. They've just been very cold and
sure, exactly.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make it where people were excited to come and had a lot of positive energy there. And the second thing we did was we incorporated dentists into the practice who normally your dentist would have to refer you out to. So an example of
quite
that is
specialist,
like your
yeah.
specialist services. That's it. So rather than having to refer people to the orthodontist, which might be in a different town, we had orthodontists working in the practice. So if somebody needed the orthodontist, they could go from my room to the orthodontist room. And that was quite unusual in that time, to have specialists working in your practice. So that kind of set the pathway for us. And we thought big. We built 7 treatment rooms for treatment.
Wow.
From a sort of what we call a squat practice, from a basically empty building. And we spent 5 years building that practice up and making it successful, and sort of defining our brand and learning what worked and what didn't work. And
presumably you were still practicing
yeah,
dentistry?
so still working as a dentist as well. And then gradually, I've just, I suppose, in a natural way, I started to feel like there must be more to life than just being in this room 8 hours a day treating my patients. And so the opportunity came to buy a second site, another practice, which we did, and we took that over. And then just started thinking, yeah, well, actually, there is something to this, because if I can have 2 practices working, then it means that I can have somebody working for me in a different practice, and that's generating a revenue that doesn't rely on me actually having to do the dentistry. And then from that moment, it kind of sparked our sort of desire to create a sort of our brand and our group of practices there, and acquired some in Suffolk, in Lowestoft and Beccles area. And
at this point, had you sort of realised that it was a brand you're building, or did you just think this is working, let's do it again? Or did you actually have that point to step back and look at what you're building there?
Sure. I think it probably wasn't until about the 4th or 5th site that I started to think that it's like something, because when you've got 1 or 2 shops, you've got 1 or 2 shops, and and it's hard work having that. And I fully respect anybody who has got multiple outlets, because there's problems here and problems there. But I think once we had our sort of 5th or 6th practice, and I started to look at the map and see that there's ones in different parts of the UK, then it started to look a bit more like a brand, and have an identity there. And people start to hear about you, people start to know about you. The dental world is quite a small world, because there's not that many dentists in the country, and you start to sort of get a reputation. Hopefully I've got a nice reputation in dentistry, and people then start to reach out to you. And so it started, I think after about five practices, I started to feel that it was like a brand in itself. And then over time we started to acquire more practices, and just interesting challenges along the way, dealing with a change of NHS contracts like you talked about there. That was something that was quite difficult to get our head around, because when the Labour government came in 2013, they changed the dental contract, and that had quite a lot of sort of effect on us. And then gradually sort of trying to build something at scale and manage it without letting the quality of the product go down is something that is also challenging to do as well, because when you've got one dental practice and you work in that practice, you can keep very good control over it and what happens there. When you start to have multiple outlets, it's more difficult to keep your eye on everything there. But thankfully, we've got a really good management team and a lot of regional managers, practice managers, and they help to keep the practices running nicely there.
Interesting. And you touched on the government changes. Was that different in different areas, different councils, or was it one thing that covered the whole of UK?
Yeah, so it was all of England basically.
Yeah.
It was a new sort of operating model that was there.
And that's probably most people's biggest bugbear about dentistry in general. They can never find an NHS practice.
Sure.
To be honest, I don't even know what the difference is and why everybody wants an NHS one. I assume it's cheaper, is it? I don't
Yes,
know.
it's basically like a subsidized.
Yeah.
That's right. Probably not as much as people think, but yeah, there is a subsidy of about maybe sort of like 10% of the fee that people pay is paid by the government. But it is free for children and for people if
of course, that would be the biggest problem,
or
the biggest benefit then to finding an NHS.
So that is a massive thing there, and we try and treat as many children as we can because obviously the children's dental health is like the future of their life.
Are some of your practices NHS as well, or
all the practices we have in Norfolk have NHS there, and in fact of the 22 that we have, there's 20 of them are NHS practices. So there's only 2 private ones that we have, and I mean I've always been somebody who's believed in NHS and provision of that. I mean, I still to this day do NHS treatment for people as well. I'll often go.
So, what is the difference from a business perspective if you were an NHS or a private?
Sure. The difference is that when you do NHS dentistry, the volume of patients is much greater. There's a big demand for it there. Yeah. So what happens is you're always busy because there's big huge demand, but the revenue that you collect, if you like, for each treatment is much less than it would be for doing it privately. So the draw of private dentistry for a lot of dentists is that they can spend longer with their patients because they're charging more. They don't have to see as many patients, and because they're charging more, they can use better quality materials and laboratories. And what it does is it gives them better time to care for the patient rather than doing NHS work whereby they feel because they're paid a lot less, they have to use lesser quality materials or work at a much quicker rate because they need to see more people there. And we're always campaigning to try and improve things in NHS dentistry. And I've had a lot of meetings with MPs and different
because it was Duncan who actually introduced me to you.
Right.
So I guess you've been pushing him for something.
So Duncan, he's a very good guy. Actually, I must say I've got a lot of time and respect for him. And I met him because we were opening up the dental practice in North Walsham.
Oh, North,
And what happened was that was a former practice of Bupa that closed down, or was in the process of closing down. And we took over that practice, and now thankfully the practice is really flourishing there and doing really, really well. And we've treated a lot of patients, NHS and private, at the practice there. And Duncan was really helpful with us to sort of get everything over the line, if you like, there. So that's and for me, I think that's one of the brilliant things about being in business and being in dentistry, is that you meet a lot of really interesting people, motivational people, and people that teach you things, and it's great networking as well. And I think that's a lot of the business that we do in our group is because of personal recommendations or long-term relationships that we have with people. I mean, we still order dental materials and equipment from people that helped us on day one 20 years ago. And it's really great to do that.
It comes up a lot on these things, that conversation about, doing business people you've grown to know, like, and trust. And it's so true. And it constantly keeps coming up in conversation as well. So it must be, quite, a big part of what people do in business. And long may that continue, I think.
Sure.
You've got to, So what's, at what point did you really step back and think, wow, we've got something really good here? Because presumably, it's good.
Sure. You know, for me, I always think like the job's not done and there's still work to do. I never sort of sit back and pat myself on the back and think, oh, what a brilliant guy I am, or what have I done? Because I never think there's anything exceptional about myself other than I work hard and I don't give up.
Well,
And
I think the obvious thing is, you haven't been afraid to replicate and grow. Whereas I'm sure a lot of people will think, this one's enough for me. I don't want twice the amount of headaches.
sure.
But I guess there is a point in time once you get the management team in place, and you can step away from the business and concentrate on the business, not in the business, then it does, well, I wouldn't say it gets easier, but there comes a point where you're putting less time in, I suppose. And
Sure. Well, the truth is, I put in a lot of time.
They're going to tell me the total opposite, aren't you?
And I think really in business, from my perspective, you can only be as good as the stress that you're able to handle really is like that. And it is stressful running a group of practices because effectively a lot of people's livelihoods and a lot of businesses that support our business rely on our business.
Yeah.
And I take that as a tremendous responsibility, tremendous privilege, and certainly I every day I work to try and make the business more successful, not only for myself but for some of the amazing people that we have working in there. We've got a brilliant chief operations officer, financial director, compliance and business manager, and these are some great people that I work with. And I work as hard for their sake as I do for my own sake.
It's another good skill you've mentioned is stick to what you're good at. If you're not brilliant at it or don't enjoy it, get someone in who does, because it's they'll do what they're good at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's definitely things that I'm not good at, and I try it. Rather than improve those, I try and find people who are good at those things.
Absolutely, yeah. So what's have you got a greatest achievement? Is any one practice doing better than the others, or is there one moment where you've won an award? I don't know. Is there something that stands out as being?
Yeah, so there has been some highlights definitely. One of my proudest moments, I suppose, was when we won a competitive procurement that was from the NHS for some extra to quite a lot of like funding to offer more activity in the practice. And what had happened is I'd been taking part in a lot of competitive procurements. The first few I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just filled it in as best as I could and obviously didn't get very far with them. And then gradually I started learning more and taking more care in presenting my procurement response. And then and each one was taking me a long time. I probably spent maybe in the region of like 100 hours per one I did there. Yeah. And what would happen is you'd get an email saying, sorry, you haven't you haven't made it. It was like rejection after rejection after rejection. And I remember thinking, like, after the 9th one, I'm just not going to do this anymore. It's just so soul destroying and disheartening that you're putting your time and energy in and you get nothing for it. And so one came up in the sort of Norfolk, Suffolk area, and I thought, I'm going to do this one as my absolute last one I'm going to do. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I did it. And we were selected as the preferred sort of bidder. And eventually we were awarded quite a good contract to provide dental services. And that for me was I was very proud because I was competing against some of the big corporates who had people whose sole job it was to do procurements, and I was sitting there in my underpants at like 6 o'clock in the morning writing it and doing it, and to be able to sort of go shoulder to shoulder with some of these people whose job it was to do competitive procurement was really like a great achievement for me. And about 1.5 years ago, we hit the milestone where we treated we hit 1 million patients where we had treated within our organization since we had been open.
Wow, that's incredible.
And that was a really nice moment because 1 million people is a lot of people, really, a lot of mouths, a lot of teeth, really, like that there. Yeah. So that was really something that was incredible. But for me, I find that I take like I get proud at small things. If there's a nurse who...
That's no small thing. That's quite incredible.
If there's a nurse who gets their qualification, I feel proud of that.
So you should,
And if we have a person who's really nervous and we get them to come in and have their treatment, I get proud of things like that there. So
they're all little achievements.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, what about modern dentistry? And obviously you've got these Invisalign, are they? And,
sure,
and you see adverts all over the place. In fact, my son actually used to do, I think, digital marketing for Invisalign, I think it was, and all I know is there's some money in that, surely. Is that something you offer and can do? And
sure, yeah. So Invisalign is basically like clear retainers, clear aligners, and it basically replaces the need to have sort of fixed train tracks that you see on people's teeth. So it's a lot more cosmetic, easier to keep the teeth clean because you take them in and out. And there's a whole series of them that you wear over a period of months, and they've been computer designed to move your teeth using different algorithms into the most preferable position. So they are a very nice cosmetic treatment, and more people are having them because they are accessible. There's lots and lots of different clear aligners.
I don't know. It seems to me as though the last perhaps 10 years it has been a trend to just take better care of your teeth.
Yes.
Whereas I'm sure 30, 40 years ago it just wasn't. And it certainly seems like there's a lot of celebrities and things like that with very white, very non-normal looking, very white, very big teeth.
Super white teeth.
But that has, I'm sure, filtered down to Joe Public, and I guess that's all part of it, and therefore more beneficial to you if you're getting people ask for it, I guess.
Yeah, that's it, and I think that we see now there's a sort of obviously general dentistry. Your fillings and your checkups are a big part of it, but it's lovely to be part of something where people can actually go to the dentist to improve themselves. I think that there's an idea in a lot of people's heads that going to the dentist is really just because there's something wrong with you, or you need a tooth out, or you've got to have something to fix a problem. Well, isn't it nice to be able to go to the dentist and have something that actually enhances you and makes you better?
Yeah. But are you presumably able to offer those sorts of things?
Yeah, so
because it's an NHS, it doesn't mean to say you can't do.
That's right.
That sort of thing as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what happens is, even though the practices have NHS element to them, they will have a private element to them. Yeah. And the reality is most practices in England that offer NHS will offer private as well. There's not really practices that are just exclusively NHS. The majority of practices will be what we call mixed practice, where they offer NHS and private there. So the types of treatments that you're talking about, clear aligners, Invisalign, those treatments, they are available at the practices, yes.
Are there any crooks out there? There are in every industry, I'm sure. But, some of the adverts you see, I think there was one went bust recently, wasn't there? A big, was it Smile Direct or something?
Yeah, so the thing is, dentistry is a big business, and it's becoming a bigger business, and people look for unique angles and ways of operating, and sometimes they'll look at ways of operating without the dentist, as weird as that sounds. Sort of having, in terms of like clear aligners, like you were talking about, using sort of where people go in and they take their own impression at home and they send it in the post or so like that, and then you don't have the dentist doing that, so you can do it cheaper because the dentist isn't doing it. But the problem is that if that person isn't really suitable for the treatment and they start moving their teeth because they've taken the impression, then they end up with a lot of dental problems, and that's where things can go wrong. So, and there are certainly challenges in our industry as well. Workforce challenges is a big part of it there. Especially in the NHS, there doesn't tend to be as many dentists who want to work in NHS as there are who want to work privately. And those who can, dentists from different countries who come to England, there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape for them to be able to work in the NHS if they want to. So sometimes practices or groups overextend themselves, and they take out a lot of debt, and then if they're not doing the numbers that they anticipate, then problems like what you said occurred. And what was quite sad about that is a lot of people had paid for their treatment and then weren't getting it. Although in saying that, in dentistry it's generally quite rare for that to happen.
I hadn't come across anything prior to that. No, certainly not. But yeah, I think it's. I think the public perception of all dentists, they just charge way too much. But that's because we haven't got anything to compare it against. We have free NHS here.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, private healthcare would be the nearest thing you'd compare it to, but most of that is paid for by insurance policies or health policies and the like. So we don't really have that understanding in this country of how much healthcare costs, do we? So.
Well, that's right. And I think that people would be quite shocked if they realised how much it costs to operate a dental practice. There's so many things that people don't even see. For example, we have to be registered with the Care Quality Commission. So that in itself is a yearly fee that we have to pay just to be registered with the Care Quality Commission. That's before we see any patients or so. Dental equipment and dental instruments are, because they're generally created in smaller quantities, are more expensive. Dental engineers who fix the chair, because there's not so many of them, charge a lot more when they come out to fix our equipment. And there's lots and lots of regulations in terms of what annual checks and things that we have to do. So running a dental practice is an expensive business in terms of that.
I can imagine,
Don't forget that when patients see the dentist, there's also the dental nurse who's there supporting the dentist. So there's actually two people that are offering care to that patient. And I think that what people do is they look at what the NHS charges are, and they think, okay, because the NHS charge for a checkup is this much, that is what it's valued at, and that's what it should be. And the truth is that dentists are incredibly skilled individuals, as are nurses and hygienists and dental therapists. They've all had to study it and to work very, very hard to get to the position that they are. And it is a stressful job and a very responsible job as well. I mean, the way I sort of see it is, if I was having a procedure on my heart, would I not want the best person and the most skilled and the most experienced person?
You certainly
doing
wouldn't
it,
want someone who's
or just
not qualified at all, would you? You wouldn't go for the cheapest, no.
That's right. You know, and when people sort of think about it like that, I think they realise that there's things can be expensive and there's things that can be value for money. And I always feel that in our group that we do offer value for money. We're not the cheapest, we're not the most expensive, but we offer value for money for patients there. And when you go to a solicitor or an accountant or some other professional person, and you ask them, well, what's your hourly rate? They are on par with a dentist.
Absolutely.
And the reality is that what a dentist does, and I'm not knocking accountants or lawyers, they're incredible people, but they're not maybe dealing with the intricacies on a human being that my lawyer is or my accountant is there.
So you touched on best achievements. Has it been, what's the biggest challenge perhaps? Have you had any real bad moments or things go wrong? Or
so COVID was a massive challenge for us there.
Yeah, that's probably. So I didn't think about it till then, but there's no getting away from that 2 meter.
That's right. So that was an incredibly challenging time because literally overnight, we were told to stop working. And if you're in IT or something, you can carry on remotely. But dentistry is a hands-on thing, and we're talking about a virus, a very contagious virus, which is transmitted person to person. So in dentistry, dealing with people's mouths, you're right in the firing line there.
Yeah.
So having to shut practices, which is something we never did. I mean, literally, in all the time we were open, we even when it would snow or so, or like the odd afternoon where we may have had to close for some extreme reason, like terrible weather or so like that, but rarely did it ever happen. And to suddenly have to close all the practices overnight was really challenging. And obviously patients still have toothache, still have problems, still have issues, even though, and they're ringing up the practice sort of begging for help. And it was really challenging, because we want to help people, and having a situation where you couldn't treat patients because of that, and people putting up with incredible problems and toothache, it was really hard. And what we did at one of our practices, we opened up as an urgent care center. So during COVID time, we were open 7 days a week, and we were seeing patients who did not have anywhere else to go, and wearing difficult PPE, those masks that you've seen on the news and in photos. And I remember being there. My job, because we had to set it up very quickly within a few weeks of notice of doing it, my job was being on the reception, and I was ringing up all the people who were leaving messages saying that they needed appointments, and staff were very scared to come in and do the work, which you can understand. And so that was probably the most challenging time, because we didn't know when we were going to get back to work. There was a lot of things to work out in terms of what did we pay people. A lot of dentists are self-employed, so there was challenges in terms of that. Working out furlough, and do you remember that word furlough? It's probably a word that people haven't mentioned since. Trying to work out people's holidays, and of course we didn't want a situation where people were then not having any holidays, because when we go back to normal, everyone's suddenly, okay, all right, I'm taking my month holiday now. And so it was really challenging working on that. And there was a lot of other aspects to it in terms of the NHS. We weren't allowed to furlough some of our staff because of the fact that we still was receiving some money from the NHS based on the percentage of what private we did and what NHS we did per year. So there was a lot of calculations and things to work out there. But yeah, that was definitely the most challenging time in the recovery of that. And we've probably only just this last year really sort of like recovered now.
Got back to
that.
Normal,
I would
it
say
wasn't
so.
normal afterwards. It was probably very busy. I think as I always say, 2023, 2024, still only most industries getting back to some sort of normality.
Well, that's it.
But still, we've got the knock-on effect now of the economy. So
yes,
Do you think the economy is going to affect you much? Certainly this year, everyone's sort of expecting it to be tough.
It is no doubt going to be a really tough year from the economy perspective, because obviously there's the rise in national minimum wage, which I don't resent at all, because I do believe that people should have a reasonable minimum wage. But there is obviously the increase in employers' national insurance, which is going to have a big effect on our group, because we have a lot of employees. And I think that we find that the climate is that when these things happen, people are slower to invest and perhaps less likely to spend, because they don't know what the future holds.
It's the uncertainty, isn't it? It just stops people spending wherever they can.
That's it.
It is a cautious time for anyone spending money, isn't it? Full stop.
That's it. So I think from that perspective, it will be harder. And from the wider sort of economy as well, with following Brexit, it's made it a lot more difficult having any sort of workers from abroad.
Yes,
because we've got to pay for visas, sponsorship visas, which is expensive. We've probably in the last year, we probably spent about £100,000 on sponsorship visas for dentists and dental therapists to come work in the UK. And that's not because we necessarily want to, but there's a lack of a workforce here. So these have been some of the challenges that we faced from that perspective. But the one thing I always remain positive, and I always think that the fact is that we're fortunate that we're in an industry where people have teeth, and every day people
are always going to get holes in those.
Every day people are being born who are going to have teeth, there's a perpetual cycle of people with teeth. So there's always something to do there, and there's never going to be a lack of mouths. So I think from that perspective, we're quite fortunate that we work in an industry where there's.
I actually think changes in the economy could harm the private dental sector more, because they are considered luxuries, or they are considered non-vital, aren't they?
So, sure, yeah, that is right. And obviously people will think, well, do I spend a few £1,000s on a dental implant or Invisalign when they can maybe not be sure what the future holds there? I mean, thankfully we've implemented like interest-free credit available to patients, so they can spread the cost of their treatment over 6 months, and things like that we've done to help people to sort of budget and to spread the cost for themselves. But yeah, I do agree with you. There will be certain cutbacks that people will have, but then at the same time, as NHS dentistry gets harder and harder to access, it does mean that some people don't have a choice, even if they would want to.
So what about technology? Obviously, I like to always touch on technology. That's what we do here. But has there been any big changes over the years in terms of, I have no idea of your industry. So
you're right.
I don't know, the tooling got any better, or has the machinery got any better? Has
there's some
X-rays got any better? Anything like that?
So there's some fab technology in dentistry now, and one of the biggest things that is intraoral scanning. So what that means is that in the past, when you would see the dentist and you needed an impression of your teeth, you'd have a mouthful of sticky, globby putty, and that would be what would be sent off to the dental laboratory to make your crown or your denture. Now we have digital scanners, so it looks a bit like a sort of like a pen that goes in your mouth, and what it does is it digitally scans the mouth, takes a 3D image of your mouth, and that can then be sent to a laboratory who can 3D mill a crown or a tooth for the individual, and then that's sent back. And what that does is it eliminates the need for impressions and that material. It also means that you can use laboratories that are all around the country, because you're not relying on a postal service or somebody to come in and collect them. It also is brilliant to be able to show the patient on the screen what their mouth looks like and monitor any changes. So intraoral scanning is a big part.
That sounds really expensive for
it is
when you just think of the cost of a bit of clay. Or whatever.
You're right.
But when you list all those things, then all those benefits, then I guess.
Well, I think we're also trying to have an environmentally positive impact as well, and all those sort of putty models and silicone impressions that we take, filling up land store is not so good for the environment. So certainly having things digital is a lot better, but it is expensive.
I can imagine
as well. Absolutely. We've just bought 2 recently, and it was probably the best part of about £35,000.
So do you have one in every?
So we don't have one in every practice, but that is our mission. So there's certain practices that we've selected to have them, our bigger practices, and then gradually over time we will have them.
And are they fairly commonplace now in most dentists?
I would say that they're becoming more commonplace, but because of the cost element of it, there's still a lot of practices that are finding it hard to make that investment. So I would say there's less practices that have than don't have.
So what about how do you get word out there about each practice? Do you do much marketing? Do you just rely on the fact because you are NHS there is so much demand, or do you have to go out and get it?
So we do a few different things. So we have our website, which is the Dental Design Studio, and we have a lady, Megan, who looks after our website and keeps it updated and fresh. Things like Facebook, we have every practice has its own Facebook account. We run some open days at the practice. We just had one of the practices recently, a really great thing called the Magic Dentist, which was aimed at children, and it was a lot of dressing up and magic and getting children to have a go at brushing life size, like a massive model of teeth and stickers and a lot of fun. So we have open days for orthodontics as well, like things that you were saying, like clear aligners and Invisalign there. So we try and promote our group, but ultimately one of the biggest and most successful things, I suppose, has been giving a good service and people talking about you in the community there. And I think one of the things I love about Norfolk and living in Norfolk is that if you get a good reputation, people know about it and you are respected for that there. And I think that's a really great thing because it forces you to do good, but also it means that if you are recognized, then people will use your services, and that's ultimately what all businesses want, is to have their services used.
I remember reading an article recently about kids and how they're not being taught as well nowadays as they once were how to brush their teeth. Is there any truth in that, or was it? It was basically just suggesting that we've become lazy parents, I guess, and they're not, or they were teaching it in schools instead of 2 years prior to that when they should have learned it.
Well, I mean, look, tooth decay in kids is a massive problem, and I see evidence of it every day, and it's actually quite heartbreaking. I mean, people probably don't realise, but the number one reason for under sixes being admitted to hospital is for teeth to be extracted.
Wow. Which
is a preventable thing. So it's a massive, massive problem there. And I would say that parents generally have got, I like to believe parents have got their children's best intentions at heart, of course. But there's toothbrushing and diet. And I think what happens is that although parents brush their children's teeth or observe their children brushing their teeth, there's so many sugary influences from society.
But do you not think that that's always been the case? I mean, I remember my, what they call it, milk teeth. I had loads of fillings in those. I don't think I had a filling ever since then. So
right, okay.
But surely there must have been the sweets and goodness knows what. Certainly was in my generation. But has it increased? Because I know they've done some stuff where the government has banned or made a levy on sugar.
Sugar tax, yeah.
So has that helped? Do you think? Or have you seen a change?
Actually, yes,
really?
It has.
Interesting.
Funny enough, I had a TV crew that came from a different country, from Austrian TV, to speak to me about the sugar tax. It wasn't because I implemented the sugar tax myself, but and what they were asking about is because they were considering doing the similar thing in Austria, and they wanted to know what the effect of that was.
You could always say no, because I want to earn more money. I want more people coming with fillings.
We love sugar. But the studies have shown that it had reduced the amount of tooth decay. And what's happened is the food manufacturers have got around paying their tax by reducing the amount of sugar in soft drinks and other food products there. So not only is it dentistry, it's also like childhood obesity and things as well. So,
there's far more benefits than just our teeth, I'm sure.
That's it. So that certainly has had a
that's interesting, because I generally try to give people a sense of sort of a common sense. They should know themselves when they've had too much sugar, surely, and we shouldn't be told by the government we can't have it. But equally, I guess there are people out there who don't have that off switch. Perhaps I shouldn't say things in public, but it's really interesting to know that's had an effect on things in general. That's good. What haven't we touched on? Work-life balance I'd like to sort of talk to you about, because you clearly are a hard-working young man. So, do you get to switch off? Do you have any hobbies? Do you can you get any downtime, or is it literally?
Sure. So I do work a lot, I must be honest with you. For me, I find that my brain is always just switched on work, but I do think that if you enjoy your work and you like what you do, then in a way your work can be your hobby as well. Yeah. But in saying that, I'm not completely like one-dimensional, and I don't just talk about dentistry. So I do like watching programs on current affairs. I like learning about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I do that.
Oh, hence why you asked me about my screen.
Yeah,
set
that's
up
a great
here,
setup that you have there. Fantastic. And I just like being outside in nature as well. And one of the reasons why I bought my barn in Norfolk was because I really love the outdoors as well. I say I bought the barn. I mean, I'm not living in a barn. It's a converted barn, obviously. I'm not living in a bunch of hay on the floor. But that's been really good, and just sort of walking and appreciating nature and just sort of taking a break from it as well. Funny enough, I really like driving as well. I drive a lot because I find that that's like just clears my head and is something else to focus on. But yeah, I've been
getting a lot of feedback from people telling me they're listening to these shows while they're driving. Obviously, listening or watching, but it's on Spotify and I think Apple Podcasts, and a lot of people are just listening to it while they're driving along.
Yeah, that's it. And it's quite a nice thing to do, actually, especially on a sunny day. It's a great thing.
Yeah. So 5 years, 10 years, where do you see yourself? What are
your plans? Yeah.
Have you planned that far ahead? Or?
I think I definitely like to have more dental practices. So the next ambition is to have a dental practice in Cromer, and that's something that I'm hoping to have in the next few months. So that's certainly going
to keep you busy for the next couple of years.
That'll be a big one. And in terms of just growing the brand and growing the group, having more practices, moving into other areas there. Of the country where we don't we're quite sort of east of the country centric, but moving into other parts of the country as well. And I think just having a voice for dentistry as well. I think that for me is one of my big ambitions as well, is to try and make the profession better and contribute to people's oral health, so that when I do eventually hang up my drills, that I can say that the dental design studio helped to improve people's lives and made a difference in the dental sort of scene.
Yeah, good for you. Well, you're definitely doing something right. I think that just about covers everything, though. It's been absolutely fascinating. I really didn't really have a grasp on the whole business side of a dentistry, but I think you've made a lot of people actually think, yeah, that's a valid point. I think most people have this misconception of dentists being big money machines, but they're really not, I'm sure. And yeah, sounds like you're doing everything right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danny, for having me.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
The Norfolk Business Show with Danny Snelling. Sponsored by MT Comms.